I never imagined that something so simple could come back to me in that way. It wasn't dramatic. There was no background, music, or epic moment. It was just real, and that's precisely why it affected me so much. Sometimes I wonder if the things we do when no one is watching really matter. If those small, almost invisible gestures ultimately have any weight. For a long time, I believed they didn't, that life followed its own rhythm, indifferent to our small attempts to be decent. But that afternoon, inside that cold office, while I held an envelope I couldn't pay, something happened. Something that made me rethink everything. Let me back up a bit. I am 66 years old. I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore either. I'm at that stage where your body starts to take its toll on the choices you've made or failed to make. Aches and pains appear without warning. Fatigue sets in sooner. And doctors start using words you'd rather not know. My name is Helena. I've lived most of my life in a quiet routine without major dramas. I worked as a teacher for 32 years, retired 4 years ago, and since then I've tried to fill my days with small things. A book here, a walk there, visits to the market, quick chats with neighbors. I don't have children. My husband died 7 years ago. It was quicker heart attack while watching television. He was laughing at some program and suddenly he was gone. I still find myself waiting to hear his voice asking where I left the car keys. Loneliness is a strange companion. It makes no noise, but it fills every space. In the first few months after he was gone, I thought I wouldn't be able to cope. I would wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I'd heard him in the kitchen. I would make coffee for 2 out of habit. I would put his chair away at the table as if he were still going to sit there. But time passes, and you learn. Not that the absence disappears. It just changes form. It devient more familiar. You learn to live with it, as if it were a scar that no longer hurts, but that you know is still there. Over the past few years, I've learned to live alone without feeling completely lonely. I've created small routines that keep me going. I wake up early, have coffee looking out the window, read for an hour, walk to the bakery. Simple things that don't require much, but that give me some sense of purpose. I chat with the bakery owner about the weather. I greet the doorman at the building. I stop to pet my neighbor's dog. Small points of connection that remind me I'm still part of the world. But in the last 6 months, something has changed. I started feeling a pain in my chest. Nothing alarme est dû à disconfort, like tight. I ignored it for weeks, thinking it was anxiety, that it would pass. Maybe stress, maybe just getting older. But it didn't get better, it got worse. The pain started appearing more frequently, sometimes in the middle of the night, waking me up, sometimes while walking, forcing me to stop and sit on a bench, sometimes out of nowhere, while I was just watching television. It was the bakery owner who insisted I see a doctor. Mrs. Helena, you look terrible today. This isn't normal. Go to the doctor, for God's sake. I went, first to the neighborhood health center. I waited 3 hours to be seen. The doctor examined me, quickly, ordered some basic tests, and told me to come back in 15 days with the results. I went back. He looked at the tests, frowned, and referred me to a cardiologist. There's something here that requires a specialist. I can't help you beyond that. I managed to get an appointment through the public system. The date was in for months. 4 months. I returned home with the timesheet in my hand, feeling the weight of that number. 120 days, almost an entire season. What if I didn't have 120 days. I tried not to think about it. I tried to follow my routine, but the pain wouldn't let me. It was always there, reminding me that something was wrong, that my body was asking for help, and I couldn't offer it. The nights were getting worse. I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, feeling my heart beat irregularly. Too fast, then too slow, then skipping a beat, as if it were tired, as if it were warning me of something. I started to be afraid of sleeping, afraid of not waking up. It sounds dramatic to say this, but it was real. Every night, before closing my eyes, I thought, what if this is the last time? That's when a neighbor from another floor recommended the clinic to me. Mrs. Helena, I know you're having heart problems. A friend of mine went to a private clinic that charges less for retirees. It's not free, but it's much less than the others. Write down the name. I wrote it down. I researched it. I saw that it was in a neighborhood I didn't know well, but that it was accessible by bus. I called. I explained the situation. The woman on the phone was kind. She said they could fit me in the following week. She asked if I could afford the consultation. I said, yes, it wasn't a lie. I could afford the consultation. The problem was the tests that would come afterward, but I didn't say that. I just marked it and thanked them. In the days leading up to the appointment, I gathered the little money I had saved. It was a reserve I kept for emergencies, and this definitely was an emergency. I arrived an hour early on the scheduled day. I took 3 buses. The trip took almost 2 hours, but I didn't mind. I just wanted answers. The doctor's office was located in a neighborhood that seemed quieter than mine. Tree-lined streets, old houses that had been tastefully renovated. The clinic operated in one of these houses, a white, 2-story building with a discreet sign at the entrance. If you weren't looking for it, you'd walk right past it without noticing. I climbed the 3 steps to the door. I took a deep breath. Première when Tamsidori welcoming. It smelled of fresh coffee. There were a few waiting chairs upholstered in light blue fabric. A table where a young woman was typing something on a computer, and a small side table with magazines and some disposable cups next to a water filter. The young woman looked up and greeted me with a polite smile. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? I have. Helena Ribeiro. Oh, yes, Mrs. Helena. Let me just get your documents to complete the registration. I handed over my ID, CPF, Brazilian tax identification number, and health insurance card, which didn't cover anything I needed, and waited while she typed in my information. Everything's fine. The appointment is scheduled for 3 o'clock. Just wait a little bit, okay? You can sit over there. I thanked them and headed towards the chairs. There were only 2 other people waiting, an older man in a baseball cap, flipping through a magazine without really reading, and a pregnant woman fiddling with her cell phone with a tired expression. Neither of them looked at me when I sat down. I chose the chair by the window. From there, I could see the street, some trees, an orange cat sleeping on a wall. I stayed there for almost 40 minutes. Time dragged on. The clock on the wall made a soft ticking that filled the silence. Every now and then, the phone rang and the receptionist answered with the same kind voice. The man in the cap was called first, then the pregnant woman. I was left alone in the waiting room. I picked up a magazine from the small table. It was about decorating. I flipped through it without paying attention. I just needed to do something with my hands, with the anxiety growing in my chest. Finally, The receptionist called me. Mrs. Helena, you can come with me, please. Premier Goep. I followed her down a short corridor to a small, well-lit room. The doctor was already there. A man of about 50, with graying hair at the temples, wearing a white coat over a blue dress shirt. He stood up when I entered and extended his hand to me. Mrs. Helena, it's a pleasure. I'm Dr. Compass. I shook his hand. It was firm, but not uncomfortable. Nice to meet you, doctor. Please sit here. Let's talk. I sat in the chair across from his desk. He pulled out a notepad and a pen. So, tell me, how are you feeling? I explained. The pain in my chest, the palpitations, the tiredness, the feeling that something was wrong, but without knowing exactly what. He asked questions, lots of questions. When did it start? How often? Does it get worse with physical exertion? Does it get better with rest? Family, history of heart problems? I answered everything as best I could. Then he examined me. He asked me to lie down on the examination table. He listened to my heart with the stethoscope. He measured my blood pressure. He felt my neck and my wrists. I went back to my chair. He remained silent for a few seconds, looking at the notes he had made. Mrs. Helena, based on your symptoms and the physical examination, I suspect you have a cardiac arrhythmia. But to be certain, you will need to undergo some additional tests. My stomach clenched. What kind of exams? He picked up a sheet of paper and began to write. Electrocardiogram cacocamplis lana stress test. With these 4, we can get an accurate diagnosis and decide on the best treatment. He finished writing and put everything inside a white envelope. You need to have these tests done as soon as possible, he said, in that serious but gentle tone doctors use when they want to avoid alarming the patient. We can't wait much longer. Untreated arrhythmia can become complicated. I nodded, taking the envelope with both hands. And how much does it cost? He handed me a piece of paper with the prices. I felt the ground disappear from beneath my feet. Evanuit's a discount for retirees. The total cost was completely out my reach. Way out. I had enough to pay for the consultation. Maybe one of the tests, if I stretched my budget. But not all of them. Not even close. I tried not to show it, but I think he noticed. Doctors always notice. You can have the tests done right here at the clinic or a lab of your choice. Assez gently. The important thing is to do them soon. I understand. Thank you, doctor. If you have any questions, you can call here. And as soon as we have the results, we'll schedule a follow-up appointment to evaluate them. Okay, it's okay. I stood up. I shook his hand again. I left. I went back to the reception desk holding the envelope, as if it weighed more than it actually did. The young woman handed me the consultation payment slip and asked if I wanted to schedule the tests right there. They did everything at the clinic itself, which would be more convenient. I remained silent for a few seconds, trying to find the right words. I need to look into a few things first. I'll call you later to schedule. Is that okay? Of course, Mrs. Helena. No problem at all. If you need anything, just call. We're here to help. She smiled. It was a genuine smile. But that only made things worse. I paid for the consultation in cash. I kept the receipt. I thanked them. And I left. Outside, the sun was strong. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the heat was still intense. I walked to the bus stop, my heavy bag on my shoulder, the folded white envelope inside. I sat on the concrete bench. The metal was hot. It burned my legs a little through my pants, but I didn't get up. I stood there, staring at the ground, at the ants walking in an organized line, carrying invisible crumbs. I felt a strange weight. In my chest, it wasn't just physical pain. It was something else. A mixture of fear, frustration, and a feeling of helplessness that I hadn't felt in a long time. I was alone. Completely alone. There was no one I could call. No close relatives to rely on. No friends with money to spare. No children to help me. Just me, sitting at that bus stop in a neighborhood I barely knew, holding an envelope full of things I couldn't afford. I thought about going back home and giving up, waiting the 4 months for the appointment in the public system, hoping that nothing would happen until then. But what if it happened? What if I fell asleep one night and didn't wake up? Who was going to find me? How long would it take for someone to notice? Days? Weeks? Miei burned. I blinked rapidly, forcing the tears back down. Not here. Not now. It was at that moment, while I was trying not to cry in public, that something inside me stirred. A souvenir. It didn't come all at once. It came gradually, like when you're trying to remember someone's name and it takes a few seconds for the information to appear. I remembered a day, a long time ago. A gesture I had made. A small gesture, which at the time seemed to mean nothing. Something I had completely forgotten until that very moment. It was like a blurry image gradually gaining sharpness. A market, a young woman, a cashier, returned purchases. Bag that I dat premier forg. And then, for the first time that awful afternoon, I felt something different. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was just a silent question. Did that mean anything? The memory returned slowly, like an old photograph gradually becoming clearer. It was almost 15 years ago, maybe a little more. I was still working, still had a busy schedule, still woke up early to teach and came home tired, but with that feeling that the day had been worthwhile. It was a Thursday morning, I remember, because Thursday was the day I always stopped at the market before going to school. A quick stop just to grab the essentials: bread, milk, some fruit. The market was 3 blocks from my house. A small neighborhood place where everyone knew everyone. The owner was a gentleman named Mr. Mario, who always greeted me by name and asked how my husband was doing. That morning, I rushed into the market. I had class in less than an hour and still needed to stop by home to drop off the groceries. I grabbed a small basket, quickly walked through the aisles, put in what I needed, and went to the checkout. There was only one line open, and in front of me, a young woman. She must have been in her early 20s. Slim, with her hair tied in a slightly crooked ponytail, wearing a simple blouse and faded jeans. She was holding a basket with a few items: a package of rice, a can of tomato sauce, a small piece of chicken. The cashier scanned the items and announced the total. The girl opened her purse and began searching for the money. I was behind her, waiting, glancing distractedly at the shelves beside me. When I realized she was taking longer than usual, I looked again. She had emptied her purse. Coins scattered in her palm, a few crumpled bills, and she counted silently, her lips moving as she repeated the count once, twice, 3 times. The cashier was waiting, patient, but also a little impatient. There were other people in line besides me. The girl counted the money again. Then she looked at the cashier and said in a low voice, "You're 1 real and 50 cents short." The cashier sighed. "You'll have to take something off then." She stood still for a moment, looking at the products on the counter. She picked up the package of rice, hesitated, then picked up the can of tomato sauce. "You can take that one away," she said, pushing the can back. The cashier processed the refund and announced the new amount. She counted the money. Again. We're still 80 cents short. This time, she didn't hesitate. She picked up the piece of chicken and handed it back. Just the rice, then. She paid, took the package, and left quickly without looking back. I stood there, staring at the empty space she had left. It wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't think about it much. I just felt something, a strange twinge in my chest, an urge to do something. I paid for my purchases and, without planning, said to the cashier, those items that the young lady returned. You can go through them again. He looked at me, confused. The items the girl who just left had. The can of sauce and the chicken, I'll take them. He scanned the items. I paid. I put everything in a separate bag and ran out. The girl was on the sidewalk, walking slowly, looking at the ground. Excuse me, I called. She turned around, startled. I held out the bag. You forgot that. She looked at the bag, then at me, confused. I am not. You forgot, I repeated, placing the bag in her hand before she could refuse. Have a good day. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned around and went back to my car. When I looked in the rearview mirror, she was still standing on the sidewalk, holding the bag, looking in my direction. I drove home, put away the groceries, grabbed my school supplies, and went to school. I didn't think about it anymore. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post it on social media. I didn't bother going back to the market right away to see if I could find the girl again. It was just a gesture, small, forgettable, and I forgot. Until that day at the bus stop, 15 years later, holding an envelope that he couldn't afford to pay for. Sitting there, with the sun beating down on my back and the noise of the traffic all around, that memory came flooding back. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered, did that mean anything to her? Did she still remember? I shook my head, of course no. It had been so long ago. And even if she remembered, what would that change now? It wasn't as if that gesture would somehow come back. It wasn't as if life worked that way. But the memory stayed with me all the way back home. I got off the bus, walked to my building, slowly climbed the stairs. The elevator was broken again, went into my apartment, and left the envelope on the kitchen table. I stared at him for a long time. Then I made tea. I sat in the living room. I tried to read. I couldn't. I turned on the television. I turned it off after 5 minutes. Night fell and I was still sitting there, with the envelope on the table, thinking about how I was going to solve this. I thought about borrowing it. But from I no longer had close contact with former colleagues. My neighbors were kind, but not close enough for that kind of request. I thought about selling something. But what? I didn't have any jewelry. I didn't have anything of value. I even thought about ignoring everything and hoping the pain would go away on its own. But I knew it wasn't going to pass. I slept badly that night. I woke up several times, with a tightness in my chest and a racing mind. The next morning, I forced myself to get up, make coffee, and follow my routine. But everything felt heavy, as if every movement required more effort than it should. I was finishing my coffee when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, expecting it to be an advertisement. Hello, Mrs. Helena. It was a young, polite female voice. Try. This is Santa Clara Clinic. You were here yesterday, weren't you? My heart raced. I thought it was a debt collection, that they were going to pressure me because of the exams. Yes, I was. Could you come back here today, preferably in the morning? I hesitated. Did something happen? No, don't worry. It's just an administrative matter that came up that we need to resolve personally with you. Nothing serious, but it would be important for you to come today. I was confused. An administrative issue. What could it be? I can go, yes. What time? Whenever you can. Ma'am, we'll be here until noon. I hung up the phone with a knot in my stomach. What could they possibly want? Had they realized I wouldn't be able to pay for the exams and were going to cancel everything? Had I forgotten to sign some document? I got dressed quickly and went out. The journey to the clinic seemed longer than the first time. Every traffic light, every bus stop increased my anxiety. When I arrived, the reception area was empty. Only the same young woman from yesterday was there, greeting me with a smile. Monsieur Elena, thank you for coming. Just a moment, please. She disappeared through a back door. I stood there, not knowing what to do with my hands. A few minutes later, she returned accompanied by a woman I hadn't seen before. A woman in her 30s or 40s, wearing a white lab coat with short hair and dark, attentive eyes. She looked affusimi stanes, my lad. Mrs. Helena, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Juliana. I am the administrative director of the clinic. He extended his hand. I shook it, still confused. Pleasure. Could you please accompany me to my office? It will only take a few minutes. I followed her down a short hallway to a small but tidy room with a desk, some shelves full of folders, and a window overlooking an indoor garden. She offered me a chair and sat down on the other side of the table. He looked at me again with that expression I couldn't decipher. And then she said something that made my heart stop for a second. I know you, ma'am. I blinked, like this. She opened a drawer, took out a folder, and placed it on the table. I don't know if you'll remember. It was a long time ago, but I never forgot. My breath caught in my throat. About 15 years ago, you were in a market, a small neighborhood market, and there was a young woman in front of you, a young woman who didn't have enough money to pay for her groceries. The world around me went quiet. She continued now, more personnel. That girl was me. I couldn't answer right away. I just stared at her, trying to reconcile that woman in a white coat, with a confident posture, the owner of a clinic, with the image of the thin girl with her hair tied back, who returned food at a supermarket checkout 15 years ago. But gradually, I saw. The eyes. They were the same eyes. Juliana smiled. A small, somewhat shy smile, as if she too were trying to process the moment. I wasn't sure at first, she said. When I saw your name on the form yesterday, I thought it might be a coincidence. Helena is a common name. But when the receptionist described you to me, I thought, could it be? Then I asked to review the form again. I saw your address, the neighborhood. And then I was sure it was the same area. The same market was nearby. She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. I tried to find you back then, you know. I went back to the market the next day. Première asquette, monsieur. Mario, if he knew who you were. He said you were a long-time customer, but he didn't know your full last name or where you worked. He only knew you were a teacher. I looked in the schools in the area, but I couldn't find you. My voice finally came out, weak. You were looking for me. I searched. I wanted to thank you. I wanted to return the money. I wanted to tell you how much it meant to me, but I couldn't find you. And with time, life went on. But I never forgot. She looked down at the open folder on the table and took a deep breath before continuing. Hasgata 2 of my life. I had left home at 19 after a terrible fight with my parents. They didn't accept some of the choices I had made. They thought I was throwing my life away. So I left, proud, stubborn, thinking I could manage on my own. She gave a bitter smile. I got a job at a diner. I didn't earn much, but it was enough to pay for a small rented room. I shared a bathroom with 3 other people. I didn't have a refrigerator. I barely had any furniture. But it was mine. I was proving to myself and to them that I didn't need help. Juliana paused, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as if she were reliving those days. But at the end of the month, I always ran out of money. I was terrible at planning. I'd spend everything at the beginning and then spend the last week eating instant noodles and toast. On that particular day, I had just received my paycheck and was already behind on rent. I paid it. There was very little left. And I needed to buy food that would last at least 5 days until the next paycheck. His voice grew softer. I had calculated everything at the market, counted every product. I thought I'd have enough. But when I got to the checkout, I realized I'd miscalculated. And I couldn't. I was short of money. I stood there in front of everyone, having to choose what to return. Rice, sauce, chicken. It was all so basic. I can have again. When I returned the chicken and kept only the rice, I left that market feeling like the most pathetic person in the world. I was 22 years old and couldn't even afford proper food. I cried on the way back. I cried a lot. I kept thinking that my parents were right, that I was an idiot, that I wouldn't be able to do it. Juliana Schwab tad bag, saying I'd forgotten it, and I knew I hadn't forgotten anything. But you put the bag in my hand and left before I could say anything. She smiled, and this time the smile was different. It was full. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching you get in the car and drive away. I opened the bag. I saw the tomato sauce and the chicken, and I started crying again. But this time it wasn't from shame. It was from relief, and from something else that I couldn't name at the time. What was it? I asked, almost voiceless. Hope. That gave me hope. Not because you paid for the food, but because you did it without wanting anything in return, without judging me, without making me feel small. You just helped and left. She crossed her arms on the table, leaning slightly forward. That night, I ate the chicken with rice and tomato sauce. And while I was eating, I thought, if there are people like that in the world, then maybe I'm not as lost as I think. Maybe there's still a chance to believe that things can get better. She paused for a long time. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. In the following days, something changed in me. It wasn't magic. It didn't happen overnight, but it was real. I started looking at my life differently. I stopped just complaining and started looking for solutions. I looked for a better job. I got it. I started studying again. I took a technical nursing course at night. I graduated. I got a job at a hospital. I saved money. I went to college. I specialized. 10 years later, I managed to open this clinic with 2 other partners. She tapped lightly on the table with her fingers, as if marking the rhythm of her own story. And throughout all that time, whenever I felt like giving up, whenever something seemed impossible, I remembered that day. Tadbaje, the lady leaving without expecting thanks. And I thought, if a stranger believed in me enough to do that, then I can believe in myself too. My eyes were moist. I blinked several times, trying to hold them back. Juliana, I didn't know. I had no idea that. I know, and that's precisely why. It was so important. You didn't do it, expecting anything in return. You simply did it, and that changed everything for me. She opened the folder on the table and took out some papers. When I saw your name yesterday, after you left, I reviewed your file. I saw the tests you need to take. I saw the costs. And I knew what to do. She shoved the papers toward me. Your exams are scheduled, all of them, for this week, free of charge. I looked at the papers, then at her, without understanding. What do you mean by free? The clinic has an assisted care program. It's not widely big have booty tags, Pags. And I'm the one who decides who gets into the program. You get in. Juliana, I can't accept this. I can't. Mrs. Helena, she interrupted me. Firmly, but gently, you literally put food on my table when I needed it most. Without knowing me. Without expecting anything in return. Now it's my turn. And I'm not asking for permission. She smiled again, and this time there was something emotional in that smile. Furthermore, technically, you're just using a resource available at the clinic. It's not a favor. It's access. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't the same thing. That I hadn't done it, expecting anything in return. But the words wouldn't come out. Juliana stood up and walked around the table, coming to my side. I've spent 15 years wanting to thank you. Let me do it. I stood up too, still holding the papers, feeling their weight, not their physical weight, but the weight of what they represented. Shugedme. And I let her. We stood there like that for a few seconds. Two strangers who had crossed paths once, 15 years ago, and who were now there, connected by a gesture I had forgotten, but which she had kept as if it were a promise. As we walked away, she discreetly wiped her eyes and smiled. The tests are scheduled for tomorrow at 8 in the morning. You bring the medical requests. We do everything right here, and in a few days we'll have the results. Dr. Compass will personally oversee your case. He's one of the best cardiologists I know, Juliana. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just show up tomorrow, okay? I nodded. I left that room feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just relief. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a strange, almost frightening feeling that the world might not be as indifferent as I thought. When I got home, I carefully put the papers away on the table. I sat on the sofa. I stayed there in silence, staring at the ceiling. And then I thought of something I hadn't thought of before. How many times had I made gestures like that? Small, forgettable ones, without expecting anything in return. Not many, I realized. But how many times had I failed to do something because I thought it wouldn't make a difference? Many, many times. I always thought that small gestures didn't change anything, that only big actions had a real impact, that helping someone in a one-off situation was just a momentary relief, not a true change. But there was living proof that I was wrong. 1 real and 50 cents. A tomato sauce and a piece of chicken. That was all. And it changed someone's life. Not immediately, not magically, but it changed. And now, 15 years later, I was changing mine too. That night, before going to sleep, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed. I'm not a particularly religious person. But night, première gaftank, for that day 15 years ago, for the memory that came back at the bus stop, for the phone number at the clinic, for Juliana, for everything. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly. No pain, No fear, just grateful. The tests were done the following morning, exactly as Juliana had promised. I arrived at the clinic at 8 o'clock, still a little apprehensive that something might go wrong, that someone would stop me at reception saying there had been a mistake. But there was no mistake. The same receptionist greeted me with a warm smile, took the medical orders, and directed me to the tests. Everything flowed with an almost unreal, strange ease. They performed an electrocardiogram, echocardiogram, blood tests, and a stress test. The procedures lasted almost 3 hours, but at no point did I feel like just another number in line. Every technician, every nurse treated me with genuine care. Finally, before leaving, the receptionist handed me a piece of paper with a return date. The results should be ready next week. Dr. Compass will have analyzed everything by then. He will explain everything to you. I thanked them and left. On my way back home, I stopped at a bakery and bought a warm loaf of bread. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed to do something normal every day to reconnect with reality. Everything seemed different. The streets, the people, the sky, everything had a strange quality, as if I was seeing the world through a slightly altered lens. I sat on a park bench near my house and ate my bread slowly, watching the children playing, the dogs chasing balls, the elderly couples walking hand in hand. And I thought about how life is made up of small gestures that seem insignificant at the moment, but carry an invisible weight. How a stranger's smile can change the course of your day. How a word of encouragement at the right time can change the course of your life. I started remembering other moments when someone had been kind to me for no apparent reason. The neighbor who once left a plate of food on my doorstep when she learned I was sick. The bus driver who waited a few extra seconds so I could get on when I was running late. The girl at the market who helped me carry my bags to the car when my arm was hurt. At the time, I had thanked them, of course, but I hadn't given it much importance. I thought they were just polite gestures, things people do because it's the right thing to do. But now I understood. Each of those gestures carried something more, an energy, an intention, a choice to be kind when it would have been easier not to be. And they had all, in some way, supported me without me realizing it. When I finished the bread, I got up and walked back home. In the following days, something began to change in me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a complete personality transformation, but it was real. I started paying attention to the small moments when I could choose to be kind, paying attention to the people around me who might need something small but important. As a market, when saw an elderly lady trying to reach a product on the top shelf, I stopped and got it for her. She thanked me with such a big smile that I kept thinking about it all day. At the bus stop, when a boy dropped his book from his backpack and the wind started blowing it away, I ran, picked it up, and returned it. He murmured a shy thank you, but I saw the relief in his eyes. In the building, when I found my downstairs neighbor carrying several bags alone, I offered to help. She accepted, somewhat surprised. We went upstairs together and talked for the first time in years. I found out she was also a widow, that she was alone most of the time, that she felt like nobody cared. And every time I did that, every small gesture, every silent choice to be kind, I felt something. It wasn't exactly pride. It wasn't moral superiority. It was a connection. I was reconnecting with the world around me. I was emerging from the bubble of loneliness and fear in which I had locked myself for the past few months. And the more I did that, the lighter I felt. The pain in my chest was still there, but it no longer consumed me in the same way. Because now something else was occupying space inside me, something warmer, something more alive. The day of the return visit to the clinic has arrived. Woke early to gosh away, put on my best clothes, not because it was necessary, but because I wanted to show respect for what was happening. When I arrived, Juliana was at the reception desk talking to someone. When she saw me, she quickly apologized and came over to me. "Mrs. Helena, how are you feeling?" "Better," I replied, and it was true. "Great, Dr. Compass is already waiting for you. Shall we go?" She accompanied me to the doctor's office. The doctor was sitting down, reviewing some papers. When teens to come smile. "Mrs. Helena, it's good to have you back. Please sit down." I sat down. Juliana stood by the door, discreet but present. The doctor arranged the papers on the table and began to speak. "Well, the test results are in, and we have good news and bad news." My heart raced. The bad news is that you actually have a heart arrhythmia that needs treatment. It's not something that will resolve itself. You need medication and regular monitoring. He paused. The good news is that it's nothing too serious. With the right treatment, you can live a completely normal life without major restrictions. You just need to take your medication, have checkups every 6 months, and avoid certain types of excessive exertion. I took a deep breath. "And the treatment, how much will it cost?" Juliana was the one who answered. "You will continue to be monitored here at the clinic. Follow-up appointments are covered by the assisted care program. And as for the medications, most are available free of charge through the public health system. Dr. Compass has already written the prescription taking this into account. You can go to the public pharmacy and pick them up without paying anything." I looked at her, then at the doctor, trying to process it. "So, I'll be okay." "Go ahead," he said firmly, "as long as you follow the recommendations. And from what Juliana told me about you, I'm sure you'll follow them perfectly." He handed me the prescription, explained each medication, the times, the dosages. Juliana wrote everything down on a separate piece of paper, simplifying it so I wouldn't get confused. When we finished, I got up to leave. But before opening the door, I turned to face them both. "Thank you. I don't have enough words to express my gratitude." Juliana shook her head. "Mrs. Helena, you did your part 15 years ago. Now, just let us do ours." I left that doctor's office with the prescription in hand and a feeling of relief so great it almost hurt. On my way back home, I stopped at the discount pharmacy. I showed them the prescription. The clerk checked it, went to get the medication, and came back with 3 boxes. "Is it all free?" I asked, still incredulous. "Yes, ma'am. It's all covered by the program. It will last a month. Then you come back with the prescription again and get more." I picked up the boxes. I thanked them and I left. When I got home, I put the medicine on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. I called the clinic. I asked to speak with Juliana. "Mrs. Helena, did something happen?" No, everything's fine. I wanted to ask you a question." "Sure, go ahead." I hesitated for a second. "You said the clinic has an assisted living program and that you decide who gets in. Do you need volunteers or someone to help in some way?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Why are you asking that?" "Because I want to help. I don't have time en premier wanto. If you need someone to organize paperwork, answer the phone, anything, I'd like to do it. Juliana remained silent for a few seconds. Then je sais, her voice filled emote need to. I know, I don't need it. But premier on it please, under the rose. I'll talk to the team, and I'll call you back, okay? Thanks. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that my life had purpose again. Not because someone had saved me, but that's because I had chosen to remain a part of something bigger than myself. In the days that followed, I started taking the medication as prescribed. The chest pain began to subside. Gradually, I regained energy, motivation, and the desire to do things. Juliana called back a week later. Mrs. Helena, we talked here, and we would love to have you as a volunteer. It won't be too difficult. You can come twice a week, about 3 hours a day. You'll help the receptionist with organizing files, scheduling, things like that. What do you think? I accept. And that's how, at 66 years old, I began a new chapter. Twice a week, I would go to the clinic. I helped with whatever was needed. I talked to the patients who were waiting. I offered them coffee. I listened, and I realized something interesting. Many of the people who arrived there were exactly like I had been, alone, scared, not knowing how they were going to pay for the tests, not knowing if anyone cared. And I, simply by being there, by smiling, by asking how they were doing, already made a difference. It wasn't anything grand, nothing that would make the news, but it was real. One day, a woman came into the clinic, crying. She had just lost her job and didn't know how she was going to pay for her sick son's treatment. Juliana spoke with her, reviewed the case, and included the child in the assisted living program. The woman left tweet up. Before leaving, she passed by me at reception and held my hand. Thank you, she said, not just for the clinic, but for being here, for greeting me when I came in, for not making me feel invisible. I smiled. We're here, whenever you need us. She shook my hand again and left, and I sat there, feeling that warmth in my chest again. It was no coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was a choice. 15 years ago, I had chosen to help a stranger at a market. Juliana had chosen to keep that idea and transform it into something bigger. And now I was choosing, once again, to be there for other people. And each choice led to another, and another, and another, like waves, like echoes. 3 months later, I was already part of the clinic's rhythm. I wasn't just a volunteer who showed up, clocked in, and left. I had become part of that place. I knew the regular patients by name. I knew who preferred coffee with sugar, who liked tea, who always arrived nervous and needed a chat before their appointment. I learned that my role there wasn't just organizational. Et toi, humain? Sometimes, all someone needed was a genuine smile. Someone to ask how are you, and truly wait for the answer. A place where they didn't feel like just another number, another problem to be solved. And I offered this, not because I was special, not because I had some extraordinary gift, but because I had learned, in the worst possible way, what it was like to feel alone and invisible. And now I refuse to let other people feel that way if I could avoid it. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that something happened. I was at the reception desk organizing old files when a woman came in. She must have been in her early 40s, her hair wet from the rain, wearing simple clothes and carrying a large, worn-out bag. She stood near the door, looking around, as if she didn't quite know what to do. "Good afternoon," I said, standing up. "Can I help you?" She hesitated. I don't have an appointment, but someone told me that this clinic sometimes helps people who can't afford to pay. Is that true? That's right. Yes. Let's see what we can do. Can you sit here? I'll call someone to talk to you. She sat down, still looking uncomfortable, as if she expected to be sent away at any moment. I went to Juliana's room and knocked on the door. "There's a woman outside asking about the program she watched. Can you help her?" Juliana was finishing a call. She gestured for me to wait, hung up, and stood up. "Sure, let's go." We went back to the reception area together. Juliana introduced herself, asked the woman to accompany her to the room, and asked me to bring her 2 glasses of water. I got the water, took it to the living room, left it on the table, and went back to the reception area. About 20 minutes later, Juliana came out with the woman. She was smiling not a lot, but enough. She seemed relieved. Juliana gave me the information so I could fill out the form, schedule the first appointment, and she explained the next steps. I did everything slowly and patiently, making sure she understood each step. When we finished, she looked at me with that expression I'd seen so many times before. Gratitude mixed with disbelief. "Thank you," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "I didn't expect to find a place like this. You're different." I smiled. "We're just trying to do what's right. You'll be okay. That's what we're here for." She nodded, picked up the paper with the appointment date, and left. I stared at the door for a few seconds after she left, and I thought, this is what matters. This exact moment. This person who left here a little less scared, a little less alone. Juliana appeared beside me, another one for the list. "One more," I repeated. She looked at me differently, evaluatingly, as if she were thinking about something. "Ms. Helena, may I ask you a question?" "Sure. Why do you keep coming here? You're already well. You're up to date with your treatment. You don't need anything more from the clinic. But you're here too, sometimes 3 times a week. Why?" I thought for a moment, because I learned something. What? Life isn't just about receiving, it's about giving. I received when I needed it. Now I pass it on. And someone who received from me will pass it on to someone else. And so it goes. It's a cycle. Juliana smiled. "You talk as if it were simple. And it's simple. We only complicate things because we think it needs to be something grand. But it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be true." She was silent for a few seconds, then lightly touched my shoulder. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me stay." That night, when I got home, I made my dinner, took my medicine, and sat on the small balcony of the apartment. The sky was clear. Some stars were visible despite the city lights. I thought about my life over the last 66 years. In the choices I made, in the ones I didn't make, in the people who crossed my path and disappeared, in the ones who stayed, in the ones who came back. I thought about my husband, about how he always said I was too kind, that I worried too much about others, that I should think more about myself. And perhaps he was right back then. But now I understood something I didn't understand before. Caring for others doesn't mean neglecting yourself. It means understanding that we are all connected, that the good you do circulates, that nothing is lost, that everything comes back, not necessarily from the same person, not necessarily in the same way, but it comes back. And when you understand that, When you truly understand, everything changes. You stop acting in expectation of reward. You stop measuring whether it's worthwhile. You stop calculating the cost and benefit of every kind gesture. You only act because it's the right thing to do, because you can, because someone needs it. And in the process, you become lighter, more whole, more human. A month after that day, Juliana called me into her office. Mrs. Helena, I need to tell you something. I sat down, curious. The woman you helped that rainy day. Remember? I remember. The one who was really nervous at the beginning. That's right. Her name is Carla. She started treatment here. She's responding very well. But that's not what I want to talk about. Juliana leaned forward. Last week, she showed up here after her appointment. She brought a bag full of children's clothes. She said her son had grown up and the clothes were in good condition. She asked if we knew anyone who needed them. I smiled. And did you know about them? Oui, knew a patient who had just had a baby and was in dire straits. We gave her clothes. The woman cried with gratitude. And do you know what Carla said when I thanked her? I shook my head. She said, I received help here when I was desperate. Now it's my turn to help someone. It's not much, but it's what I can do. I felt my eyes burning. Do you understand what's happening? Juliana continued. Carla wasn't just another patient. She became part of this, part of the cycle. And she doesn't even know that you're the one who started it all 15 years ago. She only knows that someone was kind to her. And now she's being kind to someone else. I wiped the corner of my eyes with my finger. That's exactly how it should be. Yes, and it's spreading. Mrs. Helena, more people are doing this. Patients who were helped here are now coming back to ask how they can help. Some bring donations. Others offer to do volunteer work. Others simply recommend the clinic to people in need. She paused. You planted a seed 15 years ago, and now it's grown into a forest. I couldn't answer right away. I just stood there, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't big amour complète. It was the certainty that my life had meaning, that I had mattered, that the choices I made, even the small, forgettable ones, had generated something real and lasting. A few days later, I received a phone call. It was the neighbor from the apartment below. The same one I had helped with the bags months ago. Mrs. Helena, excuse me for bothering you, but could you do me a favor? Sure. What do you need? There's a new girl who just moved into this building. She's alone, with no family in the city, and I think she's going through a difficult time. I saw her eating toast every day. I made an extra plate of food today and wanted to take it to her, but I'm embarrassed. Could you go with me? Smile. Of course I can. I'll meet you in the hallway in 10 minutes. I hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, staring at the device. That was it. That was exactly it. My neighbor, who had been helped, now wanted to help someone else. And she was asking me to go with her, to teach you the right way. We can without judgment, without making the person feel small. We went down together to the new girl's apartment. My neighbor knocked on the door. After a few seconds, a young woman in her early 20s opened it. She had tired eyes and her hair was tied up haphazardly. Hi, my neighbor said with a smile. We live in this building and we made too much food today. There's a plate left over. Would you like some? We were going to throw it away. Anyway, the girl hesitated. I don't want to bother you. It's no trouble at all. In fact, you're doing us a favor. We hate wasting food. The young woman accepted the dish. She thanked them, still a little suspicious, but also relieved. When we returned to the hallway and the door closed, my neighbor looked at me. Did I do the right thing? You did it perfectly. She smiled proudly. And I went back up to my apartment, feeling that sensation again, that heat, that certainty. Weeks turned into months, and the pace continued. I kept going to the clinic. I kept talking to patients. I kept making small gestures whenever I could, and I saw the results. Not immediately. Not obviously. But I saw them. I saw it in the woman who came back to thank us and ask if she could bring cakes for the patients. I saw it in the man who offered to fix the reception chair for free. I saw it in the teenager who started coming as a volunteer after her mother was treated at the clinic. Each gesture generated another. Each choice multiplied. And it all started with $1 and 50 cents, with a tomato sauce and a piece of chicken. One day, sitting in the clinic's waiting room while waiting for the next patient to arrive, I picked up my cell phone and opened my photo gallery. There was an old photo there, a photo I almost never looked at. It was of my husband, smiling, sitting on our porch. I looked at that photo for a long time, and then I spoke softly, as if he could hear me. You were wrong, love. I wasn't too kind. I was just the right amount of kind. And that mattered. It mattered a lot. I closed my phone and looked around. The clinic was full. People were waiting, chatting, drinking coffee. Juliana was walking down the hallway carrying a stack of medical records. The receptionist answered the phone patiently. Everything so simple, so ordinary, and at the same time so extraordinary. Because every person there, every patient, every volunteer, every employee was part of something from a cycle that began 15 years ago in a small market with a small selection. And now it was spreading, multiplying, transforming, not because it was magic, not because it was destiny, but because it was true. Because, in the end, that's what matters. Not the grand gestures. Not the epic actions that everyone sees and applauds. But it's the small choices, the quiet moments, the gestures that no one notices, but that change everything. Because what you do when nobody's watching, that's your true character. And this character spreads like waves in the water, like seeds in the wind, and it comes back. It always comes back, not necessarily in the way you expect, not like but go back. And when you come back, you understand. You understand that you were never alone, that you were never lost, that every gesture mattered, that every choice had weight. And that's exactly what life is in the end. A cycle of giving and receiving, of planting and harvesting, of choosing to be kind, even when it's easier not to be. And when you understand that, when you truly understand, everything changes. You change. And the world around you changes too, little by little, silently, but irreversibly. Before we wrap up, if this story touched you in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. That way, you'll be notified whenever a new story like this is shared here. And if you feel like it, leave a comment. You can share if you've ever experienced something similar, what this story evoked in you, or even where you're watching it from. Sometimes, writing a few words is the first step in realizing that you're not alone. And remember, what you do when nobody is watching, that's who you really are. And that matters. It has always mattered. It will always matter.